I'm Janet Cox with Climate Action California, and I want to welcome everybody tonight to the umpteenth version of these trainings we've been doing for several years now. They get better every time. I think this is really going to be a good one. We are now doing them in two parts. This is part one, where we're going to talk about passing legislation in Sacramento. On Sunday afternoon at 3, we'll do part two, which is about how to make your representatives love you and do what you want them to do about climate. And we hope that everybody will be able to come to both parts of the training. They are going to be recorded, and we'll send them around to everybody afterwards with links and other information that we'll be sharing with you tonight. Tonight's version, this year's version, we are co-hosting with our friends at 350 Sacramento, and you'll be meeting Will Brieger a little bit later. He and I are going to kind of tag team through the first part of this. Adam Sweeney is with us also. Both he and Will are board members at Climate Action California and with other organizations too. Adam is with the Climate Reality Project Silicon Valley. So just a little bit of housekeeping information. We definitely want to take your questions. We'll stop at a couple of places on our way through tonight's presentation for questions, but you can also put questions in the chat, and we'll try to answer some of those as we go, and others we'll save to discuss later on. And we're just glad that everybody is here, and we hope we see a lot more of you after tonight's training and Sunday afternoon. So with that, I think I'm going to just dive right in and start explaining a little bit about how the legislature works in Sacramento. See if I can get my screen to advance. There it goes. So this California has a bicameral legislature, which is something like the way the federal government works. We have the Senate and the Assembly. Democrats, who are generally better on climate issues, still have supermajorities in both houses after November's election. But in California, as in other parts of the country, the results of this election were more conservative than previous years. So he's essentially lost 2 Democrats in the Senate and 2 in the Assembly. We still have the supermajorities, but it just gets a little bit harder every year. So there are 40 senators and 80 assembly members. The Senate districts are roughly twice the size of the assembly districts, and more or less have 2 assembly districts in each senatorial district. Senators have 4-year terms. The assembly members have 2-year terms, which means that they are up for election every general election year, which is like the Congress. And it also means that they're raising money all the time. And some of the groups that we oppose, like oil and gas, show up with a lot of campaign contributions. There are term limits in the California legislature, which is kind of a double-edged sword, but it's 12 years total, and then you're termed out. And this means there's a lot of churn, and there are a lot of new members this year, and in 2 years from now, even more people are going to be terming out. It seems to sort of come in waves. These maps, this is way too small to see. but it just gives you a sense of the density of districts in the San Francisco Bay Area and in Los Angeles. This is really, it's where the people are, it's where the districts are, and it's where we end up doing a lot of work with the representatives in those places. And now I want to turn it over to Will, who is going to take the next little piece of this. So, Will.
Yes, good evening. Will Brieger here. So I'll let you read the slide yourselves. The last two-year term that ended in the fall was like others. We had some wins and some losses on the bills we were working on. But honestly, 2024 was a disappointment. We saw bills that we really liked get either they failed or they got whittled way back to be much less important than we'd hoped. There are a lot of reasons for that. It was an election year. There was a budget shortfall. The governor kind of went moderate for a while there. Who knows? But it made us think pretty hard about what we could do better to be more effective. So today you're going to hear about the legislative process. And then Sunday, more about the roles that we specifically play to accomplish our goals, which is essentially includes letter writing to support or oppose bills, testifying, contacting legislators, joining or organizing pressure campaigns around certain bills. We're getting better and better at those things, but as part-time volunteers spread all over this big state, there is definitely something in the needs improvement category, and that is a strong personal presence at the Capitol. Not that we don't have good relationships with a lot of key legislators, and we met with one this morning, but we have a plan for making this more effective in 2025, and we'll come back to that in a few minutes. Janet?
Thanks. So I want to talk a little bit about who the main players are in Sacramento. The leader of the state Senate is Mike McGuire. He is from the North Coast, Santa Rosa area. He has been in this position just only since February, just almost a year. What do the leaders do? They have a lot of power in that they appoint committee chairs and they appoint the members of committees. And you're going to be hearing a lot more about committees from us tonight. But we've just seen so many bills really manhandled by committees in ways that have made them much less effective, that we decided to focus on committees this year. And it looks like Mike McGuire may be focusing on committees this year too, because his committee appointments this year are much stronger than for our purposes, than they were last year. This is really notable, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes, but it's important. The leader of the Assembly is Speaker Robert Rivas, who is definitely a little more conservative than Mike McGuire at this point. And he's done some interesting things. He has added a number of committees to the already long list of committees within the Assembly. And it's not quite clear why that is. His appointments are generally more moderate on climate than McGuire's, and in general, the Assembly is more conservative than the Senate, it seems, as a rule. but we need to get to know Robert Rivas better. And that's high on our list for this year. Just to talk a little bit more about committees and some examples of the kinds of things that happened last year. There are 3 bills on this slide that we really cared about, and all of them were pretty much decimated in committee to the point that they were pulled by the authors because the committee amendments, which authors are required to take, just took a hatchet to the intent of them. So this is why we're coming up with our own committee strategy this year, and Will is going to come back and explain more about what that is. Thanks. Over to Will.
Let's go to the next slide, please. Actually, before we think too much about this slide, I want to back up to a higher altitude for a minute and talk about what needs to happen in our view in California. We've got the 5th largest economy in the world, and we really need to decarbonize it. That's obviously not going to be easy. And to do it, we're going to have to overcome resistance from some really wealthy, well-connected, entrenched industries and their trade associations. So just because we think an idea, we know these ideas are great. The Cal Chamber of Commerce and the Western States Petroleum Association is not necessarily going to lie down and let these things happen. So there are times and certain bills where we have not had a strong enough ground game to get things over the finish line. These other groups, these business groups, often have full-time professional lobbyists with Sacramento offices. We don't have that. I don't think we necessarily want that, but we have to understand what we don't have and what we need. So I think, to summarize, we need to be in the room where it happens for you Hamilton fans. And to do that, we need to be in the buildings where those things happen. So that would be the legislator offices on O Street. The committee staff have offices on N Street. And there are meetings in these lovely conference rooms in the old Capitol building that you won't see on the tours. But that's where a lot of things happen. And we need to be there. You're going to hear more about that on Sunday. For now, I just want to kind of introduce this concept of sort of special teams. As a group and as individuals, we all have lives outside of this stuff, and we're aware of that. We can't be everywhere and do everything, which is one of the reasons we want to specialize more. Last 2-year session, there were 5,558 bills introduced. There's some new rules that theoretically will reduce that to a mere 3,900. So it's pretty obvious we have to really focus our work. And as I said, I think we need to specialize. So, of course, all this stuff is interesting to a lot of us. We like all the science, the policy, the politics around climate, but we can only get stuff done that we have enough volunteers for. So we want you all to think about what's really interesting to you, or maybe there's something in your background that gives you a particular benefit you could bring to a particular subject matter. And you could be of help. And when I say of help, that could be remote. We have discussions about the policy and identifying bills from existing teams that are subject matter teams. Like there's an energy team, for example. We have great discussions about policy and science behind some of these concepts. And then we identify bills we want to support and draft letters. what we haven't had enough of is a presence in the Capitol, as I had mentioned. So that's why we're hoping people will sign up. We'll give you an opportunity to sign up and check some boxes on what's interesting to you. You don't need any special knowledge. You don't need any real experience. You really mostly have to be motivated to want to make a difference. And I know for me, I'm a new grandfather and I would do anything for my grandchildren. So that's my motivation. Everybody's got their own. So hope you will look at that sign up opportunity. And when if you check a box as being interested, you're not signing your life away. We totally understand that you have probably other organizations you're part of, and certainly a life, a family, a job, who knows? We don't want you to get burnt out. We don't want ourselves to get burnt out. So we're trying to be conscious about that and encourage you to reach out. If you have questions, you'll have an opportunity to talk to anybody here on the panel about where you might fit in and what makes sense for you and other questions you might have. So I think we can skip to the next slide. Well, hold on. Let me just say the difference from our subject matter committees that we've already had. We've got these well-oiled groups that meet to talk about bills relating to plastics or transportation, agricultural methane, energy, I'd mentioned, transportation. Those are existing, and you'd be welcome to join those discussions, which is all Zoom and things you can read and think about from anywhere. What's different is we're trying to have a smaller subgroup for each subject matter that wants to carry our message to Sacramento. And that has all kinds of benefits. The slide mentioned some of it. You get to know people, you build relationships, and ultimately will be more effective. All right, so next slide, please. In terms of these special teams that we want to really cover and sort of specialize on certain committees, because the legislature breaks its work up into these subject matter committees. These are not the whole list. These are the ones that have most of the bills that we are interested in as climate advocates. So I'll just run through quickly the Senate Committee on Energy, Utilities, and Communications. As you might expect, they are concerned with bills that affect utilities, generation of electricity, renewables, energy conservation. The Senate Environmental Quality Committee is charged with a wide range of things, but their jurisdiction certainly covers climate change bills, air quality, CEQA, among others. The Senate Natural Resources and Water Committee also covers bills affecting climate, the oil industry regulation, the management of public resources. So these are all things that touch on climate. And finally, the Senate Transportation Committee takes up bills that deal with vehicles or transit funding and planning. On the Assembly side, they have similar committees. They're the Utilities and Energy Committee for the Assembly also covers, the generation of electricity. They oversee the California Energy Commission, the CPUC, the California ISO, the grid manager, bills that concern themselves with solar and wind and other renewables would come before typically the Assembly Utilities and Energy Committee. The Assembly Natural Resources Committee also takes up climate change bills, air quality, renewables, CEQA, land and coastal conservation. And finally, the Assembly Transportation Bill Committee echoes the Senate Committee's jurisdiction, vehicles, public transit, fuels. So the idea of our special teams is that we could have a group of people presumably also participating in the discussions on the substance of these bills, but the special team would say, I'm just going to keep track of everything in front of that committee. And someone's going to attend those committee hearings. Someone's going to knock on doors and get to know the committee members. And that is where we make the most difference. So it's a matter of carrying the message to the Capitol better than I think we've done in the past. So that's all I had to say on that. And then back to you, Janet.
Yeah, well, and I'd also say that all of these committees have offices in the Capitol, and they have committee staff who write the bill analyses that in some cases are really amazingly great pieces of writing about some of these issues. They're just they really go deep. And the Senate Environmental Quality, their bill analyses are like master's theses. They're just amazing. That they do this in order to inform the committee members about the issues that they're going to be voting on. And so part of what we want these committee-based teams to do is to get to know not only the chair, but also the consultants who are the staff of they're just called consultants. They're the staff of the committees. And you don't have to be in Sacramento area to be part of one of these teams, because we also need people in other parts of the state who will have relationships with their representatives who are members of these committees. And so the Assembly, we can't believe it, but they still haven't released their committee lists. We do know who the committee members are for the Senate committees. And so this is an opportunity to both work in your own home district on these issues and to inform the work that the folks in Sacramento or closer to Sacramento will be able to do. I do want to just say, though, we can't say too many times, Will just said it once and I'll say it again, is that this has got to be manageable work, and we don't want to burn anybody out. And I think it's fun. Actually, going to these committee hearings, it's kind of addictive. It's very interesting listening first to all of the people commenting on the bills and then listening to the committee members talk among themselves as they prepare to vote. This is why I think it's a great way into this process to pick a committee and say, okay, I'm going to go to the Assembly U&E committee, and I'm just going to sit there and I'm going to learn stuff. And you can advocate for our positions on bills, but it's just really interesting. Politics is only about people, and these are pretty interesting people. So I recommend signing up. And I think we're putting a link in the chat. We have a sign up form for people who want to join this project. And the boxes you'll check on the form are pretty general, but we'll get back to you and tell you how we think you can help. Okay, I just want to say that there are other committees that will follow, but we're not talking about assigning teams to them, because all of the bills, as we're going to talk just in a moment about the process that a bill goes through to get through the legislature, go through a lot of other committees as well. And so when we are tracking a bill, we'll follow its trajectory through the Judiciary Committee in some cases. Most bills go through appropriations. We also watch the budget committees carefully because that's another way to get our climate projects funded. If you can't get a bill passed, you might be able to get the project into the budget. And the Joint Legislative Committee on Climate Change Policies does a lot of very interesting, they go deep on issues like cap and trade, and we listen carefully to their meetings. So we'll talk for a second about some of our allies and partners and some of the people that we often go up against. This is just a short list of some of the organizations that have a presence in Sacramento that we end up becoming pretty familiar with when we hang out at hearings. Climate Action California has a pretty good sized coalition of groups that include 350 groups and also the Climate Reality Project groups throughout the state and Third Act, and it's just a growing bunch of folks who we're working with all toward the same ends. There are also, these are the folks on this slide that we often find ourselves opposing, but it's really important to talk to them because sometimes we can make common cause with some of these groups. And if we can, it's a whole lot easier for everybody. Western States Petroleum Association and the California Independent Petroleum Association and the Chamber of Commerce are pretty tough to agree with because they tend to take positions against climate action. But, we're not here to make anybody mad. We really need to keep making our points, and someday we know we're going to get through to all these people because the climate is changing and it's up to all of us to figure out how to work together to fix it. So I'm just going to talk really quickly through the legislative calendar as a way of giving you a sense of how a bill makes it through the year. So technically, the 2025-2026 legislative session opened in early December. A few bills were introduced and then everybody went home for Christmas. As of this past Monday, folks are back and they're really getting going in earnest. On the 10th, which is tomorrow, no, it's not, it's Friday, the governor will submit his budget, which is kind of a draft. It is it's the governor's guess as to how much revenue there is going to be this year and how he wants to spend it. And immediately the budget committees in both houses will start tearing it apart, and we'll probably find a lot of places where we wish he was spending more. Last year was a terrible deficit year. This year, it just looks like it might be a little bit better, but it's still going to be tough. Meanwhile, while everybody's looking at the budget, the members are figuring out what bills they think they want to carry. And we're meeting with a large number of legislators and suggesting bills that we want them to carry, and we'll see how that comes out. But January 24th is the last day for members to submit what is kind of fleshed out bill ideas to the Office of Legislative Counsel, which is a huge, I imagine it's this gigantic room full of brilliant lawyers who actually have to pass on every bill that gets introduced. And they're looking to make sure that the ideas that are coming out of the legislators won't get them sued. And they also figure out where in California's statutes the kinds of changes that the bills are proposing to make will be made. So they have about a month to go through this huge number of bills that they will be handed on the 24th. So by February 21st, the legislators will have decided what they are actually going to introduce. And not all bills that go to Leg Council get introduced. And sometimes something called spot bills go to Leg Council that get introduced, but are really just sort of sitting there as placeholders until somebody decides how they want to flesh out that idea. The bill hearings, which are the committee hearings that we've been talking about, have to be pretty much done by the 2nd of May. So if you sign up for one of these committee teams, it's not a lifelong commitment. You'll have a couple of months of hearings in the spring, and another few weeks in August and September when we get to when bills get to the second house. So the hearings are pretty much over by May 2nd. And meanwhile, all of the bills that have gotten through the committee's process, most of them have gone to the appropriations committees, which look at everything that has any kind of fiscal impact at all, or even if they're just complicated, they tend to go to appropriations, and appropriations kind of sits on all the bills until the 23rd of May. And when they have to, what the appropriations committee does is it releases a long list of all the bills that they've been looking at, and they're either dead or amended or still alive or potentially kind of put on ice for later. And everybody holds their breath to see what appropriations is going to come up with. And then there's a couple weeks of floor votes. And this is when the bills that have been introduced in the Senate or in the Assembly get through that house or not. Meanwhile, the budget machinations are continuing, and by June 15th, the final budget has to pass by midnight, and sometimes it even makes it earlier in the day. Then there's a recess, and then everybody comes back, and the whole process starts over in the second house. In other words, the bills that make it through the Assembly then go to the Senate and are assigned to committees, which hear them, and that's when our committee teams will go back into action. If they make it through the committees, they go to appropriations, and if they make it through appropriations, they go to the floor, and it all is over by September 12th, which is the last day for the legislature to pass bills and send them to the governor. And then the governor has a month to decide what he's going to do. And if he doesn't decide, the bills go into effect. This is probably a good time to stop and ask if anybody has any questions about this process. Susan Dembowski.
Hi. You said something about the committee has to, or the committee chair has to accept amendments. I wasn't getting a clear picture on that.
Right. Good question. So when a bill goes before the committee, it is reviewed by the committee consultants who prepare the bill analysis, which is normally released a couple of days before the bill hearing. And the bill analysis frequently, or almost always, includes amendments that the committee is recommending, quote unquote, recommending to the author. And so when the author goes before the committee to present the bill, the chair always says, "Are you accepting the committee amendments?" And the author always says, "Oh, yes, thank you." And sometimes the amendments are just decimating. There was one famous time when the committee recommended amendments. The author said she did not accept them, and then the committee voted it through with the amendments anyway. So this is why our focus on committees is so important, and why that's a great question, Susan, is that the committees have a tremendous amount of power over what actually moves and the shape of bills. So thanks.
Is there, may I follow up there? Is there a chance for the author to engage with the
Well, it's funny because sometimes different kinds of things happen. Normally, you would hope that the author would have been warned by the committee ahead of time, and that there would have been some back and forth, because the author definitely engages with the chair and potentially with the consultants about the bill before the committee's verdict comes out in the bill analysis. There have been a couple of cases, though, when the author hasn't had prior warning and is kind of blown away by what the committee is proposing. And the author has pulled the bill at that point. So it sort of depends on the committee and probably on the relationship between the author and the committee chair. So
the bill analysis seems like that's done by the consultant staff, but the committee chair is very involved with that also in terms of overseeing that.
I think the committee chair always has a pretty good sense of what is going to happen. And, and I'm sure that the other members of the committee have access to that information, whether they have the time to go deep before a hearing. I think that's probably just pretends, that just depends. But it also, you would hope that the author would be doing some jawboning with committee members ahead of time, but that's what we do. And the other thing I should say is that we generate a lot of letters that are opposing or supporting bills, and there are two kinds of letters. You'll be hearing about this next on Sunday's hearing, but there are really two kinds of letters we write. They're the kinds of letters that say that we support or oppose a bill, so we'll get our name in the bill analysis. But there are also letters that we write that are really designed to inform the consultant's opinion about the issue that the bill is taking up. And because we have a lot of expertise among our volunteers, we're able to sometimes really add substance.
Yeah. Janet, if I could just jump in this as well. We do have a really deep bench of people that know these issues. And so it's super gratifying to send in a detailed letter opposing or supporting a bill and then see entire paragraphs of our letter lifted and put into the committee analysis. Then you really know that they're paying attention. And now that document is for sure going to be read by the members of the committee.
Right. Thanks.
And can I just asking questions except this one? What we see in Ledge Info on a particular bill on the analysis, is that related to what is given to the committee members?
Yes.
It's public in advance.
Well, it's not long enough, and often it's the day before the hearing, which kind of drives everybody crazy, I'm sure, except that these folks are scrambling to get this done. But yes, the bill analysis that is in Ledge Info, which you'll be hearing about in a minute, is definitely what the consultants have put together for the committee.
Thank you.
So let's take, Maria has a question, and I'm a little nervous about time, so we need to speed up here, but.
Sorry,
Maria.
Murray was next.
Oh, sorry, I didn't see it. Go ahead.
Okay, my question is, do all the bills have to go through the legislative council?
Yes.
So that means any bill that's going to get, no, so that means that any bill that's going to get passed in the year has to be submitted by January 24th?
Yes, except that there's this thing called spot bills. And a spot bill is a bill, and the whole text of it says, it is the intent of the legislature to pass a bill that about plastics. And so Ledge Council kind of signs off on that because it doesn't have anything bad in it. And then later on, the author can substitute more substantive information for those words. And that's called a gut and amend. In other words, you gut was what was there before, and you amend into it other content.
The
And
specifics.
that's the way to get through, to get past the initial Ledge Council deadline, because after you do a gut and amend, that new bill has to go to Ledge Council, but it won't have to be there by January 24th. That makes sense?
Yeah, okay.
Yep. We have another question.
Yeah, this is Maria.
Hi.
Hi. I wanted to go back for just a minute about your earlier comments about increasing presence in Sacramento. Can you say a little bit more about what that looks like, or what in practical terms, what does that mean other than physically going there and being, attending hearings and that kind of thing?
Do you want to take that one, Will?
I'll take that. Yeah. So, I mean, it's a little daunting for, those of us who we read the news, we follow things, we hear about how something's very politicized or what's going on. It's super easy to walk into these public buildings and go to someone's office. Let's say it's a state senator, and there's a receptionist, and you say, I'm a constituent, or I'm with Climate Action California, and I'm really interested in such and such bill. I'd like to talk with the staff person who staffs the senator on environmental bills, or I'd like to set up a meeting with the senator herself about such and such bill. And because you're there in person, you're going to get a lot further than an email. I don't have any scientific backup for that, but I know in my gut it's true. And when you actually do talk with somebody face to face, even if they come out, they're busy, they come out to the front desk for 3 minutes to talk to you, they know you were there, they've seen you, they know you cared enough to come to Sacramento and come up to the 5th floor office to talk about this bill. That makes an impression. They get probably hundreds of emails a day. They see all the letters of groups supporting bills or opposing, and that's important. We make sure our groups are on those letters on the things we care about. But that human contact is huge. It's a democracy. As much as, it's easy to be cynical, and there's obviously a lot of money behind the scenes and relationships and things that are not in the public view. It is a democracy. And when a legislator feels that there's a lot of interest or pressure on an issue, they're going to respond. And it's anecdotal. They're not doing a scientific poll on how important some bill is to the people of California. They're just going to remember that someone was in their office, or that their staffer said, yeah, we had 10 people come by today. They all want to talk about this bill. That really registers. So it can take a lot of forms. I mean, at its best, you develop a relationship with either a legislator or a staff member to where you can call and get appointments more easily than everybody else, because they know you and they know you're reasonable and they know that you care about a particular issue. That's what the professional lobbyists work so hard to develop. And there's no reason we can't develop that. It just takes physical presence and time. So obviously it's an advantage to have an office in Sacramento, but we've got a lot of people around the state, including many here in Sacramento, who care. And there's no reason we can't play that inside game as well as anybody else.
Yeah, this is an alternative to hiring a lobbyist and turning our issues over to that lobbyist. Everybody knows the lobbyists when they see them. And I think that a well-informed citizen, Californian, makes a really strong impression. And what we need to really make clear is that you will be completely prepared when you go to one of these meetings, because we have our subject matter teams that are reviewing these bills, and you'll be totally briefed before you ever go to talk to somebody about these. But I think it really makes a difference. I mean, and for example, if we have 4 or 5 people who want to go to pay attention to transportation bills, you can just go and have a meet and greet with the transportation committee staff, with those consultants, and say that this, you're with Climate Action California, 350 Sacramento, transportation is your issue, and you're really going to be following what they're doing. And, these are the things that we're interested in. And, we're looking forward to following your committee hearings. And that way, when you get to a hearing and you're going to stand up and go to the mic and say that you're representing Climate Action California and we support this bill, the staff and the members and the chair will recognize you. Right. And it makes a big difference.
Yeah, Janet, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I didn't mention that is a part of the being in the building is attending the committee hearings, the formal hearings. And after each bill is presented by the author, there is a chance for people who are present to come forward to the microphone and simply identify yourself. I'm Will Brieger. I'm from I represent Climate Action California and 350 Sacramento, and we're strongly supporting this bill. And you're there and they hear you and see you, and it registers. You know, presumably they already have a letter from us too, but.
Yeah. And just one other thing to note is that one reason that we're doing this now is that things were different during the pandemic. During the pandemic, they set up phone lines for all committees so that everybody from all over the state could call in during a committee hearing and register their approval or disapproval of a bill on the phone. And it was great. And there were people from all over the state who had never been engaged with the legislature before because they live in Monterey, and who can get to Sacramento from Monterey? It's impossible. But after the so-called end of the pandemic, as if it was over, they canceled that policy. And so Climate Action California and a whole lot of allied groups have a petition that we are still pushing to get the legislature to restore that policy so that people from all over the state can be heard in committee hearings. We tried it last year and we didn't get very far. I think that even if we are successful in getting that policy back, and you'd think if there was ever a year when democracy was important, this is it. It's still really impactful to be in Sacramento and have your face known by the committee staff and the committee members. And that's why we think that our committee strategy is so exciting. But I just want to say we're still advocating for people to be able to participate in those hearings from all over the state. I think, have we answered your questions about this? Is that enough? Maria, do you have a sense of what we're talking about? You can wave or something. I can't see you, but I hope so. And we'll have a chance for more questions at the end. There we go. Now we're going to turn it over to Adam, who is going to review some of the tools that are available online that really makes tracking bills a whole lot easier. And California has some great tools out there. So over to Adam, who's going to share his screen.
All right. Hi, everybody. My name's Adam Sweeney. I'm a volunteer here at Climate Action California. And we're going to talk about how you don't go to Sacramento and you do everything from your computer at home. Exactly the opposite of everything that Will's been talking about for half an hour. Really, we're going to talk about the tools that our legislature makes available to us for accessing all the information about what's going on with all the bills that are active or historical at the legislature. Now, if you're not like a supercomputer person, don't worry about it. This is just going through websites, really nothing technical about this. 2 years ago, I knew nothing about any of this. I've spent the last 2 years staring at all this stuff all day long, too many days of the week. It's very doable, as you'll see in a moment. And as I have in the past, I want to send a big thank you to Kathy Schaefer from the Climate Reality San Fernando Valley chapter. She's the one who taught me all of this. So now I'm going to try to help teach all of you. If you look at your screen, what you see is what we call the LegInfo website. It's the California Legislative Information website. It's got all the legislative information, of course. And when you come here, this is exactly what you see. Most of it is a big database, right? You're just accessing a big pile of data on the back end that has all the text and history and status and vote information, all of that we're going to talk about. So let's just start by looking at an example bill, the kind of thing you would normally do. Now, normally if it's an active bill, you can type it in right here at the front. Since we just switched terms last session's bills are You have to tell it you want to go back to the last session to find them. But we'll go and look at one of Senator Becker's bills about everyone's favorite topic, net energy metering. This was the one that was about schools and apartments and farms. But what you see here is what you see every time you look up a bill. You look it up and it starts with the number and title of the bill. You see here in the top left. You scroll down a little bit, you can see who the author and co-authors are. Co-authors are additional legislators who work with the legislator who's the main pusher of the bill, and they work together to spend a lot of time getting the bill passed. Down below that, you can see what's called the Legislative Council's Digest. This is very handy. You know, we talked a little bit about, well, why do bills go through the Legislative Council? Well, one of the reasons is to write this section. They write a human readable summary of what is this bill about and what's it going to do, what's it going to change. And so this is where I always start, is just reading this to try to get some high level sense of what is going on with this bill and what is it for. Once you go down below that, you can actually see the text of the bill itself, the changes it's going to make to the laws of the state of California. And most bills are changes to existing sections of the law. Sometimes I guess you add whole new areas, but many of them anyway, are making changes in a given section or adding a little more within an existing section of our law. And you'll see basically all the text here. I think the key thing to know is you should not be afraid of reading this section either. You don't have to be a lawyer to read a bill. There's some funny lingo in them, which you get used to pretty quickly, right? Once you start to read these things, you get the hang of the structure of how the Leg Council folks who put together this text, how they do it, the way they say things, what they mean when they use some funny words that you had to Google the first couple of times. But it's really not particularly intimidating. You should just dive in, even though it seems like, oh my God, I'm not a lawyer. How could I ever do that? But it's really not necessary. You just read it, and if you don't understand, you'll have questions that you can go looking for the answers for, and we'll talk about where you find those answers. And so that's kind of the main thing of the text. Although when a bill is more active, sometimes you'll see red and blue text here. Those are amendments in the latest version of the bill. We'll talk a little bit more about how you see the different versions in a minute, but often on the main page, you'll see red and blue text, some of it, the red parts crossed out. And those are active, kind of the most recent amendments to the bill. A really important thing, if we look over here, like I mentioned, is the database. It's got all of this information about, well, what's the status of the bill? I think where I tend to look the most is kind of down here at the location and kind of activity. These few lines here will usually tell you what's going on, what committee is this bill headed for, and when is that committee maybe supposed to meet. Although this is not what I would rely on for knowing when those committees are going to meet. But you will see what committee the bill is headed for next. And that can be very important because many times we're accessing this database so that we can submit letters, advocacy letters, either supporting or opposing the bill, and you need to know what committee to submit those letters to and who you're addressing them to. Now, another really important thing, once you start following along on bills, like if you were very excited about this bill and it was still active, you want to keep track of what's happening with it. And so there's a very nice system here in the Ledge Info system where it will email you every time the status of the bill changes. Oh, pardon me, I thought I'd taken care of this, must have timed me out. Come on. What happened? I'm sorry, we're just kind of having a minor technical difficulty. There we go. Sorry about that. All right, so if we go back, well, we'll look at we need a current one here. So let's Let's look at SB 30. This is kind of a funny bill from Senator Dave Cortese, my local senator. It's about, we don't let them resell those old diesel trains to somewhere in South America. Scrap those things. So if I'm excited about this bill and I want to know what's happening with it, I can come here under the subscriptions page and I can tell it, yes, tell me every time something changes. Click add notifications, and now it's on my list of bills that the system is going to email me about every time something new happens. A committee votes on the bill gets amended in committee, all of those exciting things I'll now get emails about so that I don't have to come here and stare at the screen for every bill I'm interested in every day to know if something happened. It's a lot better to get an email about the ones where something actually did happen. Now, if we go back, let's go back to 1374. One of the really interesting things that we've already mentioned are the bill analysis documents. These are done by the staff members of the committees and of the House as a whole about what's happening with this bill. They're supposed to be written by people with a clue, and they do have a clue. They're usually very good about what's going on with the bill and what's interesting about it. So if we go ahead and look at one, this is kind of the original Senate Energy Utilities and Communications bill analysis from when this bill first hit that committee way back early last year. And what do we find here, right? This is a whole analysis, as it's called, of the bill. We can see like what's important about this bill, what's the background, bunch of commentary from the staff people related it. There's a bunch of related legislation, which can often be important since it's very hard for all of us to keep track of all the history of so many bills. But this section, the prior sections, will talk a lot about what does the bill do, what does it not do, what, in case that's important and maybe the staff thinks it needs to do more. One of the things we participate in as advocates is getting our group's names on this list right here, either the support list, which is very long in this case, or the opposed list. This is very common to have a very long support list and a very short opposition list in our world. You'll see a lot of climate and environmental groups on the support side, and you'll see the utilities on the opposed side for a bill like this, and that's not unusual at all. Now, the way you get your group's name on this list is to submit an advocacy letter to the committee before their deadline. And your letter we'll talk more about letters in a little bit, but that's how you get it here, and that's important. These lists matter. People look at these lists, they look to see, oh my God, that's a lot of groups that are in support of this bill. And that does have an effect on people and is something useful that we can participate in and pretty easily participate in. All right, so that's a bill analysis. And as you might notice, there's one for every committee and every floor vote that the bill has to go through. And they change each time. And often you have to resubmit your letters if you're doing this each time. The committees don't just carry them forward. It might vary by committee, but I think they mostly don't. They want to see it resubmitted. And we mentioned amendments earlier. So there's a whole tool here for comparing versions of the bill. So if we look at the final bill, we can compare it to what it looked like when it was first introduced. And it's like, well, all that summary stuff didn't change, but boy, we added and deleted quite a bit of text here in the kind of the meat of the bill where it says what matters. And so you can see that bills do get amended quite a bit as they make their way through the process and through all the committees. And you can see all of those changes here. You can see each one of the committees that it went through and what those amendments were compared to the final version. So I guess there's two other tabs here I want to take a quick look at that I find these very useful. I think you will too. One is the history tab. This shows you all the votes. Well, actually, all the steps. The votes are on the votes tab, of course. All the steps that this bill went through, what committee it went through, how it went from here to there. It does have the results of the votes, just very short here. And so you can see kind of, as it's called, the history of what's been happening with this bill. This bill went all the way through the process and it was eventually vetoed by the governor. So as you can see right there, right? And so all that information is here in the history tab. And the votes tab has for every vote that was taken on the bill, the important things of the results, obviously most important, but also who voted for it, who didn't, who voted against it, and who pretended they weren't there so they didn't have to vote against it. That's pretty much what no vote recorded means. Occasionally, it just means they couldn't be present because they had to be in another committee meeting or something like that. But a lot of times it means they didn't really want to vote no, but so they just did this instead. And it basically has the same effect as a no vote as far as the committee is concerned. They can be changed. If they really couldn't make it to the committee hearing, you will see these NVRs change later in the day if they're able to come back and submit their vote. But you can find all of this information here, and it's really good if you're trying to see, what did my legislator do? What did that legislator I've been working with, what did they actually do when it came down to it? So that can be very, very handy. So, all right, so that's LegInfo. LegInfo is great. You'll spend a lot of time there. It's a great tool. Let's take a look at the websites for each of the houses. This is another place where you spend some time because this is where we find all the information about the calendars for the legislature and what's going on with each committee and their hearings and which bills they're going to talk about in which hearings. So you'll see there's a menu here for the committees, and we get the whole nice long list of committees. You can see there's quite a few of them. We're going to take a look at the Transportation Committee here in the Assembly. You can see it's chaired by Lori Wilson. I actually got to meet Lori Wilson this fall at a campaign event. She was very nice. And they have lots of information here about your committee that's important. Like for us letter writers, there's the very important things are, when are they due? And every committee's page is a little different. They're not uniform, unfortunately. But you can usually find this information. You just have to kind of dig through the text on the page to find it. When's your letter due is important because you got to get your letter in before that deadline in order to get your support or opposition into the analysis that is going to be submitted to the committee. Hearings are, of course, a big thing because that's where you got to be 7 days before the hearing date. Well, when the hell's the hearing? Well, you come down here to the committee hearings, and normally, when it's not the very beginning of the legislative session and no one's on committees yet, you will see here their next 1, 2, 3 committee hearings. And for each hearing, you will see the list of bills that are going to be heard in that hearing. And that's really how you track, when's my bill really going to be heard? So when do I need to get my letter in by? Other important things, it's nice to know, especially if you're writing letters and you want to put a physical address in the heading, you can find the physical address for the committee down here in the committee information box. And very importantly, you can find the committee's phone number. You will find at various times that you're unsure. When is this bill going to be heard? What's going on with this bill? What is this committee doing with it? When you don't know, you can just call, and a friendly person on the other end will actually help you to understand what's happening with your bill. Don't be afraid to call them. It's mostly a bunch of young people. They're very nice. It's their job to help you. And they generally appreciate that you are participating in this process and advocating for or against the bill. My experience has been very positive in calling the committees whenever I'm unsure about something and just asking. Now, if we take a look at the Senate website, each house has their own site. There's Mr. McGuire, nice picture. Also met him at a campaign event this fall. He does seem very up on climate stuff, which was great to hear. Like the Assembly site, they have a page for all of their committees, and we can take a look at, say, the Energy Utilities and Communications Committee, now chaired by our favorite Senator Becker. Here you find information about when they meet, what they do, and what their rules are, when your letters have to be submitted. Other kind of exciting details, like your letters need to be signed. This varies by committee, so you want to look for this. Some of them don't care if you actually have a signature on your letter, but some of them do. And so you got to be able to like get your signature into the PDF that you submit online. You also generally find the members of your committee here. If you're trying to figure out who's on this committee, it'll be here. It's just, we're just at a funny time when things are not listed yet. So finally, last thing I'm going to talk to you all about is how we submit a position letter. And so you'll find these links. They'll take you to the advocacy portal. Try this. That is the right one. Yeah, all right. I apologize. It's not going to let me log in today. I logged in earlier today. I don't know what's going on. It's a very simple website. You do have to create your own account. So you go to the advocates portal, and the portal will allow you to create your own account. And once you have an account, you can associate yourself with the group that you're a part of, and you could submit letters on behalf of your group and multiple groups when you're representing more than one. So it's a very simple process. You select the committees that you're interested in submitting to, you upload your PDF, and on you go. And if you're wondering like what an advocacy letter looks like, I think we're going to talk about this more next week, but I'll just give you a quick preview of one that I wrote last year for SB 1374 with the help from others on our team here. These letters can be very simple. Sometimes they can be super technical, and you can say like, you need to amend the bill this way because you're missing this, and then that can be very useful. Other times you just want to say, hey, our group supports or opposes this bill. And you can give a little bit of reasoning, and that's all you have to say, because you're just trying to get your support or opposition recorded and included. And that's a worthwhile thing to do. All right, I think that's it for me. So I will stop sharing and hand it back to Will and Janet.
Thank you, Adam. I think that was really helpful. And once you've started poking around with these websites and ledge info, it's pretty easy to figure out how it works. We're coming up to the end, and I do want to have time for some questions. I just was going to say a little bit about the budget, which is really important. One of the things that we found last year, I think I said this earlier, was that some of the important climate measures that couldn't make it through the legislature found their way into the budget. It really matters. The budget needs to be very strategic from our point of view. And fortunately, we have some really excellent climate advocates running the budget committees this year. So follow along with us, and we will try to keep everybody informed about what's happening in the budget as it goes starting this week on the 10th. So so I just looked, there are about a dozen people who have signed up for the committee teams, and here's another way you can do that. And I think we're also putting the link in the chat. We would love to have a lot of people sign up to do this work. And I saw a question in the chat. A couple of people thought they were too far from Sacramento to be able to join these teams. I don't think that's right at all, because we really do have good relations with our representatives through the Zoom meetings that we set up, which are all remote. And we've got a lot of those going now. And, when someone is on the committee and you're following the bills that they're looking at, when you have a relationship with that person, you can just call up and talk to the consultant about.
Janet, can I just add something there? There were some questions in the chat, for people who are hundreds of miles from Sacramento, presumably.
Right.
You can go to your local office. Every elected legislator has one or more offices in their district. You can go there. You can meet with the legislator if you time it right, for a recess or a time when they're not in Sacramento. Or you meet with their staffers who I guarantee will report back to their boss. If you go in and have a nice talk with the field representative in your community, for, state senator so-and-so, or you bring a group or whatever you do, they're going to report back and say, yeah, people are really watching this bill. They're interested. They're watching, essentially the subtext is they're watching what you do on it. So that's something you can do without traveling as far, for sure.
Yeah, and you can also, if you sign up on the legislator's website, for instance, to get notices when they're having meetings in the districts or, town halls or something. You can go to those meetings and ask a question and introduce yourself as being a part of Climate Action California and get on the radar that way. I mean, these folks' job is to serve the people in their districts, and that's you. So there are plenty of ways to make yourself known and make friends with these folks and make a difference. And there'll be a lot more about that at the training on Sunday afternoon at 3:00, and we hope that you'll all be there. So let's just take a few questions. If do the folks who've been looking at the questions have some suggestions for what we ought to talk about, or people want to put up their hands? How do we want to do this?
Maureen has her hand up.
Great.
This question is in regards to the support letters and position letters. Where are you keeping the support book to archive all of the letters from all of the members in the coalition that submit them?
Where are we keeping? Well, we have all of the members, all of the letters that we send, and often we send them on behalf of multiple groups, are in files in our Google Drive. And when you're part of the coalition or submitting letters, you'll have access to that folder. Faramars.
Hey, yeah, so I just wanted to say thanks for this presentation. And one little tip, when there's a vote, particularly if it's a floor vote, so if it's the full Senate or the full Assembly, it's a good idea to try to screenshot the vote. And the reason for that is exactly what Will and Adam were talking about earlier, which is the legislators can go back later and change their vote, but it's also a good idea to know how they voted in real time, because sometimes they'll play sort of games where they'll vote against you when it matters, and then after the dust settles, they'll change their vote so that the record makes it look like they're with you. So just a little pro tip, screenshotting votes is often a good idea for accountability.
No, it's really interesting. And if I forget to do it, I can usually find it on formerly Twitter. We're moving to Blue Sky, I hope. But yeah, it's usually somebody has got that up there. And yeah, it's highly interesting to compare the vote as it's initially recorded with what shows up in Ledge Info 48 hours later or something. So, yeah. Anybody else? I think we can wrap this up. And I'm just really grateful to everybody for coming. I hope that you show up on Sunday, which was sure to be, it's kind of the other half of this training. It's where what we've been talking about today really turns itself into actionable ideas. And we'll also be getting the recordings out to everybody. I think Linda has her hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to invite folks who'd like to. It might be nice to get a group photo of those who showed up today. We could come on camera and, give a high five or thumbs up or something. These kind of photos can help show the legislators our power as a group, and we can share it with them when it feels appropriate. So if you'd like to do it, thanks. I see lots of folks coming on camera. Awesome.
So I'm going to
a
stop
minute.
sharing to make that possible.
I think you did stop. Well, on my end, you stopped sharing, so it looks perfect. Beautiful. I see 43 people here. I'm going to take 2 screenshots then. One of the folks who are, oh, I'm not. Hang on. I'll come on camera myself. There I am. Okay, here we go. 1, 2, 3, cheese. And then, yeah, let's do like a high five or a thumbs up, some kind of energy. Oh, that's beautiful. Yeah, 1, 2, 3. And now one more, the second screen. One more time. 3, 2, 1. Some energy. Woohoo! Beautiful. Thank you, everybody. What a great group.
Thanks, everybody. Please be in touch. This is just the beginning of this very interesting year, and we look forward to working with everybody. So have a good night, and thanks for coming.